This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good evening everyone. Shalom Aleichem. Parshas Chayei live from Cedarhurst, New York. So a few very important announcements. First, we want to thank Rabbi Schwartz for sponsoring tonight's Shiur. There's a chus for all the Chayei Yisrael. This chus HaTorah should protect all over Klal Yisrael, and refuah shlema to his mother, Gittel Rivka Bas Roiza L'Refuah Shalema. Thank him for sponsoring the Shiur, cover the Shiurim, and the Shiurim on Sefer Parshas are sponsored by Dodi Burko, as is chus for Ari Tzvi ben Liba Slava and Yusuf Tzvi ben Necha. Okay, welcome everyone. And tonight we are not only going to be on Torah Anytime, but this Shiur is going to be syndicated on podcasts, on iTunes, on some of the other syndicators.
Netflix?
But whatever they are, you could catch the Shiur over there. Okay, so we continue in Sefer Parshas, Parshas Chayei. If anybody wants to participate in the upcoming Sefer on Sefer Parshas, please contact us. Okay, Marv Rabbi, and of course, if anybody wants to get the new Sefer on Reb Meir, the good news is, let's see if, Reb Irwin, you ready for the big Shiur? Tomorrow morning, 5:30 a.m., there's a Shiur to Australia. It's going to be 9:30 p.m. in Australia, so Irwin's going to get a good night's sleep. Or maybe he's up already. It looks like he's up already, right? I have to get the good night's sleep. And if anybody wants to get at 5:30 in the morning, or if anybody wants to get the new Sefer on Reb Meir, you could go to Torah Anytime, go to the speakers, Glatstein, and you click the link, and the Sefer will be shipped to you. Okay, Parshas Chayei. So Avram Avinu is making a deal with his trusty servant Eliezer, and he says, "Do me a favor. I want you to find a shidduch for my son Yitzchak." Now it's interesting. Yitzchak never publicly expressed any interest in getting married over here. Yitzchak's not even a player over here. But Avram Avinu is taking care of the deal like a good tata. A father has to marry off his kid, and he tells Eliezer, "I want you to go back to my hometown, and I want you to pick a wife for my son, for Yitzchak." And Eliezer says, "Well, what if she doesn't want to come with me? Maybe I'm going to need to bring him over there." And Avram says, "Chas v'sholom, I love Avram. Hishamer lecha, watch out, pentoshes mishama, lest you bring my child over there. Heaven forbid that you take my child out of the land of Israel." Now, why was Avram hesitant to have Yitzchak leave Eretz Yisrael? The answer is, it doesn't say.
How old was Yitzchak?
Yitzchak was 37 years old at the time. It does not say why Abraham did not want Yitzchak to leave Eretz Yisrael. It doesn't say anywhere in Rashi. And this is where the Shiur began. Because I remember there's this idea that Yitzchak can't leave Eretz Yisrael, so I went to look at Rashi, and I looked at Rashi, and Rashi says absolutely nothing. So I'm scratching my head. I was sure it was a Rashi, Well, isn't it a Rashi? Doesn't Rashi say something that Yitzchak can't leave Eretz Yisrael? Now I said maybe it's a few psukim later. So Avram Avinu says, "Look, I want you to swear to me that you're going to find a wife for my son. And if the woman does not want to follow you, you will be clean from this oath. Just my son, do not bring over there." Now, rak is a miyad, it's exclusionary. Don't bring my son over there, but that sounds like someone else will go there. Namely, says Rashi, us. I figured here's the Rashi. No, Rashi doesn't say anything. Rashi says rak miyad, rak is a miyad. My son won't go leave Israel. Aval Yaakov ben beni sofer lachzor, but my grandson will leave Israel. So I'm thinking, where is this Rashi that Yitzchak Avinu cannot leave the land of Israel? I remembered it had something to do with the fact that he was a carbon and he's an Olah, and a carbon Olah can't leave the land of Israel, and I figured maybe it would be an interesting subject to speak about Yitzchak Avinu being an Olah. Like, what does that mean? Could a human being a carbon? And then I looked in Parshas Toldos, and sure enough, in the following week, next week, where it says, "Vayirav ba'aretz milvad harav harishon asher hay b'mei Abraham vayilech Yitzchak el Avimelech melech Plishtim Gerara." So Yitzchak is headed south of Israel. He's headed to the land of Egypt. He's going through the land of the Philistines. And God says, Vayerav Hashem hayomer al teir Mitzrayim. God appeared to him and said, don't go down to Egypt. Shechoin ba'aretz. Dwell in the land asher oymar elecha. Says Rashi, God appeared to Abraham and he says, don't go to Egypt. Al tered Mitzrayim, says Rashi, he had in mind to go down to Mitzrayim, like his father did in the times of famine. So Hashem said, don't go. You're a carbon Olah Temimah. Ein chusarz kedai lecha. Now it's interesting, Rashi doesn't say God said don't go. The only thing is the Torah says God said don't go. God said, Al tered Mitzrayim. Rashi says what God told Yitzchak was, you're a carbon Olah Temimah, you're a whole Olah, you're a carbon that was brought on the Mizbeach, and therefore Chutz La'aretz is not the right place for you. The Medrash elaborates further. Gur ba'aretz hazois, God said, live in this land. Rabbi Oishia said, you're an Olah Temimah, just like a carbon Olah, if it leaves the Klaim, it's pasul. So to you, if you leave Eretz Yisrael, you're going to become pasul. So Yitzchak is a carbon, and God said, no, don't do it, you can't leave. Just like a carbon Olah, if it leaves the curtains, it becomes pasul. So to you, if you leave Eretz Yisrael, you become pasul.
Only that carbon?
Yeah.
No other carbonos?
Well, other carbonos you're allowed to eat perhaps outside in Yerushalayim, but a carbon Olah cannot leave the confines of the Klam. Now, here's the question.
Not even Eretz Yisrael.
True. So what's interesting here is Yitzchak a carbon or is he not a carbon? If he's a carbon, then he should permanently move in to the location of the Beis HaMikdash. Because a carbon can't leave the confines of the Klam. Forget about Yerushalayim, he can't even leave the Azara. And here, there's no problem with Yitzchak leaving the Beis HaMikdash, there's no problem with him leaving Yerushalayim, there's a problem with him leaving Israel. So if he's a carbon, he shouldn't be allowed to leave the Beis HaMikdash. If he's not a carbon, then he should be able to go to Mitzrayim. What exactly is this mathematical equation? You're something like a carbon, and therefore you can't leave Israel. Either you can't leave the temple, or you're not a carbon. But my question is, why does Rashi only comment in next week's Parsha, when God told Yitzchak, don't go to Egypt? Rashi says, you know why you can't go to Egypt? Because you're a carbon Olah. Why doesn't Rashi comment in this week's Parsha, when Abraham tells Eliezer, don't you dare take Yitzchak to Chutz La'aretz? Rashi should say, on the spot, you know why you can't take him to Chutz La'aretz? Because he's a carbon Olah, and you're not to take an Olah Chutz La'aretz. Why did Rashi only, so to speak, wake up next week? Why this week is no reason offered? Now, the truth is, many Mefarshim do say on this week's Parsha that the reason why Avraham Avinu told Eliezer, don't take Yitzchak to Chutz La'aretz, is because he's a carbon Olah. Namely, Rabbeinu Chayei writes in number 7, Pen Toshev es b'ni Shama, Pen Toilech es b'ni Shama, maybe you're going to take my son there, Ki lo haya Avram chafetz sheyetze Yitzchak min ha'aretz ha'kadosh l'chutz La'aretz. Avram did not want Yitzchak to leave the Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz, l'fi shehu Olah Temimah, because he is a carbon Olah. So Rabbeinu, what I want Rashi to say here, that which Rashi says next week, Rabbeinu B'chai Taka says here. In fact, I saw an interesting gematria in a sefer, Keren LeDavid Ulazaroi. If you look at the pasuk, Vayomer Elav Avraham, and Avraham said to him, what does this mean? Vayomer Elav Avraham. The Rashi Tevos of this pasuk, Vav, Aleph, Hey, Lamed, Pen, Taf, Aleph, Beis, Shin. You got that all computed? The gematria of the Rashi Tevos of this pasuk is Yitzchak Olah Temimahu. So I'm sure you figured that out on the spot, but I put it on just in case somebody didn't compute it, that the gematria of the Rashi Tevos of this pasuk is Yitzchak is an Olah Temimah. So what I wanted Rashi to say, and what Rabbeinu B'chai says, in fact, is the pshat in what Avraham told Eliezer, is merumaz begamatria on the Rashi Tevos. In fact, even further, what I wanted Rashi to say, the Chizkuni says, Rashi says. Look in the Chizkuni, number 9. When Avraham tells Eliezer, Rak es beni lo yisashev shama, B'ni einei chayzer, my son won't return. Lefishu Olah Temimah, because he's an Olah Temimah. V'ein chutz la'aretz kedai loi. And chutz la'aretz is not worthy of him. Eini roitze sheitz meretz achuzasai. Now, 1 second. What the Chizkuni says, Rashi doesn't say. Chizkuni is extrapolating based on what Rashi says in next week's Parsha, and he's saying Rashi over there, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Yitzchak, don't leave, Hashem said, don't leave because you're not allowed Temimah. So the Chizkuni says that's what Rashi means over here, why Avraham told Eliezer that you can't take Yitzchak out of Eretz Yisrael. But again, I'm still troubled. Why, in fact, did Rashi not say in this week's Parsha that Avraham told Eliezer, don't take him out because he's a carbon oila? Now, I remembered something, but I couldn't put my finger on it until I published the sheets, and then I just added to it. There is another Rashi in Chumash that there's another nafkamina that Yitzchak Avinu was a carbon oila. And we're going to come to it toward the end of the shir. In preparing the shir, I saw two chidushim, actually two different svarim of Reb Shmuel Baruch Ganat. One, he wrote an article in Moriah Journal, and one is from the Sefer Kuntras Rinas Shmuel. And he has the following interesting question. Why did the Ribbon Hashem have to tell Yitzchak, stay in Gerar, don't go to Egypt during the famine? Didn't Yitzchak know already he's not a leave Eretz Yisrael? That's what Avraham told Eliezer, don't take my son to Chutz La'aretz. So didn't Yitzchak already know from the Hashem came to Eliezer? Avram came to Eliezer. He said, Eliezer, don't take Yitzchak out. Presumably it's because he's a carbon oila. So from there, Yitzchak should have gleaned that as a carbon oila, he's not allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael. So then why does God have to appear to him next week and say, Yitzchak, don't you dare leave Eretz Yisrael, you're a carbon oila? Yitzchak should have said, I already know that. My father already told Eliezer, I can't leave Eretz Yisrael. So Rav Shmuel Baruch Ganat offers the following answer, and I have somewhat of a problem with it. He says like this, Yitzchak knew he was a carbon oila. And that's why he wasn't allowed to find a shidduch in Chutz La'aretz. But we know that a carbon is only a carbon as long as it's Temimah. But as soon as it becomes a Baal Mum, it doesn't have Kedusha anymore. In next week's Parsha, the Pasuk says, Vayhi ki zaken Yitzchak vatechena einav mera'os. His eyes dimmed. The eyes of Yitzchak Avinu dimmed. Now the Rambam writes in Hilchos Bias HaMikdash that someone who's not able to see well is considered a Baal Mum. So Yitzchak figured, I know I couldn't find a shidduch in Aram Naharayim because I'm a carbon oila, but that's when I was seeing good. That's when I was a young chap. But now I'm much older now. Now during the famine. Now I'm married. Now I'm much older. Now I can't really see that well. Now I'm a puzzle carbon. So maybe now I could go to Chutz La'aretz. That's why even though Avraham told Eliezer, don't take Yitzchak to Chutz La'aretz, because he's a carbon, Yitzchak thought, that's very nice, that's when I was seeing good, but now I'm not seeing good anymore, so now I'm a Baal Mum. So if I'm a Baal Mum, I could go to Chutz La'aretz. So I wasn't satisfied with this answer, for the following reason. At what point in Yitzchak's life was he not able to see well? So it depends how he became blind. If it's because he became blind from the wives of Esav, Rashi says he became blind from the wives of Esav. Esav wasn't born yet, so he's not blind yet. If he's not blind yet, he could see, so he's not a Baal Mum, so then he shouldn't be able to go to Chutz La'aretz. So the question returns, why did God have to tell him, don't go Chutz La'aretz? He wasn't a Baal Mum yet. Elamai, you go like the what? From the Akedah. So it was the Akedah, he was blind from the beginning, even before he was looking for it. He was blind as a little kid. He was blind at 37. So then what? The tears of the Malachim fell in his eyes. So if that's the case, before he was looking for a shidduch already, he was blind, and yet the Yibban Hashem said, don't leave because you're a carbon. So then what changed exactly in the middle? Now, for some reason though, the Rav Ganad is saying that in between when he was looking for a shidduch and when there was a famine, that's when he became blind, and that's why Yitzchak thought, since he's a Baal Mum, he could go to Chutz La'aretz. His mistake was that Yitzchak thought he's a Baal Mum, and a Baal Mum is a problem before he became a carbon. But here, in other words, what makes Yitzchak an Olah? The fact that he went on the Mizbeach. So if he becomes a Balmum, this is like becoming a Balmum before his Hakrava, which is a problem. But the truth is, he already was Nikrav because his ashes are piled on the Har HaMoriah, and if you become a Balmum after the carbon, that does not passel you, so he was considered still a carbon. Be it as it may, again, let's review the question and the answer. The question was, didn't Yitzchak know that he was a carbon already? Avraham already told Eliezer that don't take Yitzchak to Chutz La'aretz. So why did Yitzchak have to be reminded, don't leave? And the answer is, in the interim, Yitzchak became a Balmum. So I would like to suggest another approach, why even though Yitzchak was told, or he knew from Abraham that he wasn't allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael, he still needed to be commanded by the Ribono Shel Olam not to leave in the times of the famine. And with this we come to the question of Rabbi Yitzchak Sorotzkin. Rabbi Yitzchak Sorotzkin, and there's a Sefer, Shmua Toiva, has a very interesting question. This question is like this. Why did Rashi wake up in Parshas Toldos to say that the reason why Yitzchak can't leave Eretz Yisrael is because he's a carbon Olah? Why didn't Rashi say that when Avraham told Eliezer, don't take my son to Chutz La'aretz, Rashi should have said, because my son is a carbon Olah. So, Rabbi Yitzchak Sorotzkin and the Sefer Shmua Toiva says the following interesting chiddush. Rinas something else? Rinas Yitzchak.
Isn't that Sorotzkin also?
Yeah. The Rinas Yitzchak is Rabbi Sorotzkin, yeah. Yeah, correct. Yeah. This is Rabbi Yitzchak Sorotzkin. Number 11 and then number 12. He says like this. 11 is Rabbi Sorotzkin, 12 is someone else. Which one?
Yeah.
The other one. No, the Rosh Shiva. Yeah, I think. Yeah. So he says something very interesting. What is the halacha? Is somebody allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael? Stam. Let's say somebody hears that in America they invented a new lollipop. Are you allowed to leave Israel to partake of the new lollipop that was invented in America?
No, but
You're not allowed to.
You leave for a shidduch.
One may not leave the land of Israel. If somebody lives in anybody in Eretz Yisrael, you cannot leave the land of Israel. If you want to come to the Shiur, you're allowed to leave Israel. If anybody wants to take a flight to next Wednesday night Shiur, it's permitted to leave Eretz Yisrael. Or if you want to get the new Sefer, you could also, but it's available in Eretz Yisrael. But all kidding aside, you're allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael for one of three reasons, the Rambam says. Number one, to learn Torah. Number two, to get married. And number three, if there's famine. However, the Rambam says it is not midas chasidus to leave Eretz Yisrael in a time of famine, because Machlon and Kilyon left Eretz Yisrael in times of famine, and look what happened to them. Okay. Now, even though you're allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael to get married or to learn Torah, are you allowed to leave permanently to get married? In other words, let's say you need to find a shidduch, but the girl says, I'll marry you, provided that you live in Woodmere, between Peninsula Boulevard and West Broadway. So the guy could say, I want to get married, but I cannot leave the land of Israel and stay in Chutz La'aretz to get married. Do we paskin that way? Yes. Not everybody. Jewish people paskin that way. Gentiles do not paskin that way, but Klal Yisrael does paskin. One may not leave the Holy Land, even Bizman Hazeh, to get married permanently, or to learn Torah permanently. You can only leave temporarily to find the shidduch and bring her back. She doesn't want to go back, you can't come. That is the psak of the Rambam, because the Rambam says you're allowed to leave Lilmod Torah Lisa Isha, Kishadaitoi Lachsar. Says Rabbi Yitzchak Sorotzkin Mamish Go'inas. When Eliezer said to Avram, what if she doesn't want to come with me? Should I take Yitzchak with me and let him live in Chutz La'aretz so he could be married to some girl in Chutz La'aretz? Avram said, Chas v'shalom, rakas b'ni lo yisashev shama. Nothing to do with the fact he's an Olah Temimah, not because he's a carbon, because you can't leave Eretz Yisrael to permanently reside in Chutz La'aretz. That's what Avram was saying. And that's why Rashi does not say one word in this week's Parsha. In this week's Parsha, when Avram Avinu is adamant, do not take Yitzchak to Chutz La'aretz, Rashi doesn't have to say anything. It has nothing to do with the fact that he's a carbon. He can't go to Chutz La'aretz because you're not allowed to permanently go to Chutz La'aretz, not for a marriage and not for Torah. But in Parshas Toldos, Yitzchak wasn't going permanently. He was going for a few days because there's nothing to eat in Eretz Yisrael, so he figured he'll go temporarily to Mitzrayim so he could have a bite to eat. So was Yitzchak allowed to do that? So God said, even though you're not going permanently, so there's no Isser of leaving Chutz La'aretz to go to Eretz Yisrael, it is also for you to leave Eretz Yisrael to go to Chutz La'aretz temporarily because you're a carbon oila. So this answers all the questions. This answers the questions of why Rashi did not comment in this week's Parsha. When Abraham told Eliezer, I don't want my son going l'chutz la'aretz, Rashi should have said he's a carbon oila. It has nothing to do with the fact he's a carbon oila. The idea was he would go l'chutz la'aretz to be there permanently, and Hashem said it's obvious why he can't go there permanently. You're not allowed to leave Israel to go permanently to chutz la'aretz. Elamai, next week, Yitzchak wants to go temporarily. The reason he can't go temporarily is because he's a carbon oila. And this answers the kasha of Rav Ganat. His kasha was, didn't Yitzchak know already he's a carbon oila? Why did God have to tell him he's a carbon oila and don't leave? The answer is Yitzchak had no idea he's a carbon oila. How would he know? Oh, because that's why he couldn't leave Eretz Yisrael. That wasn't the reason. The reason he couldn't leave Eretz Yisrael is because you're not allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael permanently to find a shidduch. It was a chidush that God told him, by the way, you can't even leave temporarily. Okay.
But who said he was going to leave permanently?
That's what Eliezer was saying. Eliezer said, look, what if the girl doesn't want to go? Can I bring him with me to move to the 5 towns? And Avram Avinu said, heaven forbid to permanently stay there.
That's even for Torah, it can't be permanent.
Even Torah, it can't be permanent. The maila of living in Chutz La'aretz is that you could live in Chutz La'aretz. Unfortunately. But once you move to Israel, there ain't no returns. Now you're allowed to come back for Parnasa, but again, so this is a very interesting thing. In fact, there's an interesting tshuva you ready for this? Shailas Utshuvas Mekadshe Hashem of Reb Tzvi Hersh Meisels. I see my friend Reb Nassan, we were just there a little bit ago. When was that? I think during Asar Simei Tshuva, right? Asar Simei Tshuva we're there. And Reb Tzvi Hersh Meisels fields the following question. How was Yitzchak? Chazal say that Abraham sent Eliezer to marry a woman for Yitzchak because Yitzchak couldn't leave to Chutz La'aretz. But what do you mean? He's allowed to leave Chutz La'aretz to marry a wife. So says Reb Tzvi Hersh Meisels, Avadi is allowed to leave to marry a wife if he's going temporarily. But he couldn't go temporarily because he's a carbon oila, and as a carbon oila, he cannot even go temporarily. Now,
the answer
yeah.
that he gives over here in the second pasuk, the Kisa Mishikasi doesn't point to that problem, because once he does get married and stays out, it's Yitzchak's problem, not Eliezer's problem.
Right, but Abraham was stipulating in the deal. It's like Abraham Avinu didn't want his son going there. Why? I mean, why did Abraham make it his problem?
That's not Eliezer's problem. To stay there, it's really Yitzchak's problem, not...
You're right. Somehow Abraham himself did not want his son going there. Now, coming back to an interesting point over here. We said that Yitzchak is a carbon oila, and therefore he can't leave Israel. Well, wait a second. If he's a carbon oila, he shouldn't be able to leave the parameters of the Mikdash. What do you mean he can't leave Israel? So Rabbi Yo Mizrahi says, you're a carbon oila, and you're Kodesh Kadashim, and to you the whole Eretz Yisrael is likened like the Azara, and Chutz La'aretz is like outside of the Azara. And just like Kodesh Kadashim can't leave the Azara, you who are like a Kodesh Kodashim, you can't leave the Azara, namely Eretz Yisrael. In other words, there's some concept that on some level, on some dimension, Eretz Yisrael is like the Azara. In other words, it's not mamish Yitzchak is a carbon oila, and because if he was, he wouldn't be allowed to leave the mikdash proper. But he's some dimension of a carbon oila in that, in the dimension of Eretz Yisrael, bring the Azara, he can't leave Eretz Yisrael. So in the Sefer Ben Melech, just points out that this gives us a heightened understanding of the chashivas of Eretz Yisrael. How should we view Eretz Yisrael? We should view Eretz Yisrael as its mamish, the makoim habeis hamikdash. In other words, there is a mikdash proper, but there is an expanded version of the Beis HaMikdash. In a sense, the whole Eretz Yisrael has a degree of sanctity of the Beis HaMikdash. There's an element of mikdash to the entirety of Eretz Yisrael. There's a concept that clergy, Kohanim, the Kohen Gadol we know has to spend the whole day in the Beis HaMikdash. He's not to leave the Beis HaMikdash the whole day. It's a kavod to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that his clergy stay in the Mikdash. And that's why this Sefer points out, Avraham Avinu was commanded, walk in the land, don't leave the land. Hishalech ba'aretz lech lecha el ha'aretz asher areka. There's a concept, Avraham Avinu was a kohen, and even though the mikdash is the mikdash, there is a dimension of mikdash to the whole Eretz Yisrael, that we should view Eretz Yisrael as this is sort of the house of worship of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Even though we only view the Beis HaMikdash proper that way, but there is a dimension of house of worship to the entirety of Eretz Yisrael. Now, Marv Rabboisai, where else do Chazal say that Yitzchak Avinu was a carbon oila? It's very interesting. In next week's Parsha. How old was Yitzchak when he got married?
37. 40.
He was 37 when he needed a shidduch, and he waited 3 years until Rivka Avinu became Roy Labia. He was 40. And how old was he when he had children? 60. He waited 10 years until she's worthy she's capable of having children. And 10 years he waited for her to be considered Nakara, and then he really davened. Ask Rashi, why didn't he marry Shivcha like Abraham? You ever wondered? Why didn't Yitzchak marry a Shivcha? Abraham married a Shivcha. Yaakov married 2 Shivchais. Yitzchak should have married 4 I don't know. He should have married a bunch of them. Why didn't Yitzchak Avinu marry Shivcha? What? The Shivcha store is never closed. You know? He could have gone, Rabbi said he could have gone to South Africa and picked up Shivcha. Maybe. There were this happened to be before they abolished slavery, right? The story of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov was before Abraham Lincoln, right? There are a lot of shivchas all over the place.
She couldn't marry a shivcha.
It says,
she was a carbon, probably a carbon.
So Rashi says, "V'shivcha l'ratzalisa l'fisha neskadesh b'hara Maria lios oila Temimah." Yitzchak was a carbon oila. A carbon oila can't marry a shivcha. So right before we went to print, I found a beautiful idea in the Sefer.
Where does it say that over here? So
Rashi, number 16.
Yeah.
So in the Sefer Mayan Ganim, he says something beautiful. The Gemara in Tainus says that Rav Nachman said, they said to Rav Nachman, if there is a plague in Eretz Yisrael, then even in Bavel you have to fast. Why? Because if the mistress is in distress, if the mistress is smitten, all alachas kama v'kama, the shivcha is smitten. Chutz la'aretz, vis-a-vis Israel, is a shivcha vis-a-vis the mistress. Chutz la'aretz is like a shivcha connected Eretz Yisrael. So he suggests the same way, being a carbon oila, Yitzchak Avinu couldn't leave Israel, he also couldn't marry a shivcha. What Eretz Yisrael is compared to Chutz La'aretz, a Isha is compared to a Shivcha. So as a carbon oila, he couldn't leave Eretz Yisrael, and he couldn't marry a Shivcha. That's a very nice idea. But I want to point out the comments of the Zohar HaKadosh.
Yeah.
The Zohar, right? And Reb Sender wants to hear what the Zohar says. Avraham Avinu, it says Avraham. Ve'elet Holdois Noach. Right? Who else? Yaakov, Yaakov. Shmuel, Shmuel. But not by Yitzchak. It doesn't say Yitzchak, Yitzchak. Right, Azriel? It doesn't say it not in Parshas Tzav, and not in Parshas Tazria, and not in Parshas Shmini. It does not say anywhere Yitzchak, Yitzchak. Why not? Why is Yitzchak the only one who doesn't get a double name? The Zohar writes, Yitzchak was the highest of all the Avos. Why does it say by all the Avos and all the Tzaddikim two names? Because they have two neshamas. A neshama of this world, a neshama of the next world. But when Yitzchak Avinu was at the Akedah and the knife was on his neck, he literally left this world. And his neshama of this world left. And when it came back, only the neshama of the next world came back. So Yitzchak Avinu is on the madrega of being dead even when he's alive. Yitzchak Avinu is on the madrega of Tchias HaMesim. When Yitzchak Avinu came back, what did Avraham Avinu say about him? Baruch atah Hashem Chayei HaMesim. Yitzchak Avinu is in the time of the Kates, even when he's Chai. That's why his name is Yitzchak. Yitzchak spells Kates Chai. He's in the end even when he's alive. That's why Yitzchak means to laugh, because Yitzchak represents the time of Oz Yimalei Schoi Pinu. Yitzchak, we will laugh in the future. He's already living in the future now in the past.
Why is it saying that?
So therefore it doesn't say Yitzchak, Yitzchak, because he only had the neshama of La'asad Lava. He didn't have the neshama of this world. He's living in the Kates even when he's Chai. That's why Yitzchak is the only one of the Avos that the Rebbeinu Shalom said, Elokei Yitzchak, when he's alive, because he's already secured and vouchsafed that he will never veer off, because he's already on the madreg of Olam Haba in this world. It is through Yitzchak that we're Zoichet to Olam Haba, and to Tchias HaMesim, and to the Gula Asida. The Gemara in Shabbos says the only one of the Avos is going to argue with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and fight that we should be Zoichet to the Gula is Yitzchak, because Yitzchak's on the madrega even when he's in the next world. He's still in this world. He's Chai even in the Kates. You know why? Because he's an Olah Temimah. He's completely mizdabig to HaKadosh Baruch Hu without any blemish, without any faults. By the way, why? When we say Yitzchak is an Olah Temimah, says Rav Moshe Shapiro, that doesn't mean he tried to have been an Olah Temimah, that Avram Avinu attempted to bring him as a carbon Olah. No! Avram Avinu was makriv him. And even when he wasn't makriv him, he put his knife on his neck. And even when he put his knife on his neck, his neshama left. And God, so he was an actual carbon. And even when he was removed, what does the pasuk say in Bechukaisai? V'zacharti es briksi Yaakov, v'af es briksi Yitzchak, v'af es briksi Avraham Ezgar. Asks Rashi. You ever hear of Rashi? He was an Orthodox rabbi. Rashi asks, he was my Elta Zeda, and so almost everybody else in this room. Rashi asks, why does it say v'zacharti by Yaakov, Ezgar by Avraham, and no zechira by Yitzchak? You know why? Because Hashem has to remember Avraham, because it happened in the past. Hashem has to remember Yaakov, because it happened in the past. But Yitzchak, God doesn't have to remember, because his ashes are still on Har HaMoriah. Yitzchak Avinu wasn't attempted to be brought as a carbon. He was brought as a carbon. He was brought up, the knife was on his neck, he died, and he turned to ash. Yitzchak Avinu turned to ash. God doesn't have to remember Yitzchak. There's a pile of ashes of Yitzchak on the Makam HaMizbeach until today. Yitzchak's in the next world, even when he's alive. He's Yitzchak, he's Kates Chai. Yitzchak's going to come through for us in the future when God says, can I bring the Gula for these people? Yitzchak says, of course you can. But, Palgi Olayu, Palgi Olecha.
That's what he was saying. That's why.
Right? He's going to be the argument. By the way, you know, the Zohar says that David HaMelech got 70 years from who? We always say from Adam, but there's another cheshbon that we like to say over. He got 5 from Abraham. He got 28 from Yaakov. Why Yaakov 28? Koyach. Yaakov Avinu had the koyach. Koychi v'roishes oini. He had the koyach to overcome temptation. And Yosef gave 37. Those were the 37 years that came from that really Yitzchak was going to give. Why 37 Yitzchak was going to give? The 37 years before he became an Olah Temimah. So if you add 5, 28 and 37, that's the 70 years of David HaMelech. Everything about Yitzchak's what?
That's why we break the middle matzah.
That's why we break the middle matzah. Very good. Pagilai, Pagilach. Says a Munkacher. Yeah? So, says Rav Shimshon Pinkus brings that the whole life of Yitzchak is one of great chidush. Avram Avinu was an akar. Sarah was an akara. Avram Avinu was toichein ve'enoi poilet. Sarah Imenu was an islandess. And they produced a Yitzchak. It doesn't make sense. How could they produce such a child? It was statistically impossible. Avram looked in his astrological signs. No, there's no indication that there will ever be a Yitzchak. Yitzchak was already slaughtered on the Mizbeach. No, Yitzchak comes back. He was down for the count. He's Ketz Chai. He's alive, even though he's already in the next world. Yitzchak Avinu spent 3 years in Gan Eden. Yitzchak Avinu bequeathed to Klal Yisrael the possibility for the future, and that is Olam Haba. Because Yitzchak Avinu, by the way, when Yitzchak Avinu wants to give the bracha to Yaakov Avinu, to Esav, and he smells, Rashi says he smells Gan Eden. How in the world does Yitzchak know what Gan Eden smells like? He's the only one who would know what Gan Eden smelled like. He's already in Chai, he's in the Kates, even when he's Chai. Yitzchak Avinu was intimately familiar with the La'asid Lavai. And this is the darga of Olah Temimah. He's Olah Temimah, he can't leave Eretz Yisrael. He can't marry a Shivcha. It doesn't say Yitzchak because he only possesses the neshama of La'asid Lavai without the neshama of Olam Hazeh. So we should talk about Zoicha that Yitzchak Avinu's argument should be heard, and we should be Zoicha should send Klal Yisrael the Ketz Chai, the Zman of the Gula, the Zman of Tchias HaMesim, and thank you everybody for listening, and wishing everybody a wonderful night. Baruch V'atzlacha V'chol Tov. Shkayach. Good night.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.